You're listening to the CyberWire Network, powered by N2K.
AI keeps improving. It integrates people like with different smaller or less visible aspects related to whether it's the ethnic background, the skin complexion, the type of hair, in our case, even masks.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Caveat, the CyberWire's privacy, surveillance, law, and policy podcast. I'm Dave Bittner, and joining me is my co-host, Ben Yellen from the University of Maryland Center for Health and Homeland Security. Hello, Ben.
Hello, Dave.
On today's show, Ben tracks down the controversy over Apple's recently released AirTags. I review regulatory changes coming in 2022, and later in the show, my conversation with Richard Carriere of CyberLink to discuss how AI is transforming surveillance. While this show covers legal topics, and Ben is a lawyer, the views expressed do not constitute legal advice. For official legal advice on any of the topics we cover, please contact your attorney. This episode is brought to you by Palo Alto Networks, the leader in cybersecurity. As AI-driven attacks increase, organizations can't afford to have network security that's stuck in the past. Discover how Palo Alto Networks can help you predict what's coming and proactively secure against it with a zero-trust, AI-powered network security platform built to secure whatever, whenever, wherever. To learn more, visit paloaltonetworks.com/network security platform. And now, a word from our sponsor, SpyCloud, the cybercrime analytics leader. SpyCloud disrupts cybercrime by telling you what criminals know about your business and your customers, so you can take action to prevent ransomware, session hijacking, account takeover, and online fraud. SpyCloud constantly recaptures and analyzes new data from the criminal underground, including credentials, session cookies, and PII siphoned from malware-infected devices. With knowledge of the specific exposed data criminals have in hand from InfoStealer malware on managed and unmanaged devices, security teams can respond with a more efficient and effective process called post-infection remediation that fits seamlessly into existing incident response frameworks. Get SpyCloud's post-infection remediation guide outlining the 7 steps for preventing a malware infection from becoming a full-blown ransomware incident. Visit spycloud.com/cyberwire. That's spycloud.com/cyberwire. And we thank SpyCloud for sponsoring our show. All right, Ben, let's jump in with some stories this week. Why don't you start things off for us? What do you got?
So my story comes from the New York Times by Ryan Mack and Kashmir Hill, and it is about the Apple AirTag. It was released in 2021. We can say that now that we're no longer in it.
Last year.
Yeah, it was so last year. But the AirTags are a way of helping you find things. So if you're like me, you lose things frequently. And having the AirTag, attaching it to that thing, whether it's your car keys or a remote control or anything. Child is nice. Yeah, anything you don't want to lose.
Right.
You attach your AirTag to that thing.
Yeah.
Of course, with any technology like this, you're going to get some privacy concerns. And we're starting to see these stories of people getting notifications on their phones saying there's an AirTag that's been in your vicinity for the last 6 hours.
Right.
So the hook, they talked to this woman from Los Angeles who got one of those notifications. She does not own an AirTag, but something had been attached somewhere near her for a period of 6 hours. Apple, to their credit, has set up a system where you're alerted if, you've been followed around by an AirTag to prevent against AirTags being used as a surveillance tool. So you can see why a criminal, for example, might want to use it, or even an enterprising law enforcement agency. Instead of, tacking it onto your child, tack it onto somebody's car to follow them.
Right.
Tack it to your ex-wife's vehicle. to see if they're cheating on you. Tack
I
it to.
saw one yesterday on Twitter where someone was tracking their luggage being stolen from the airport in real time thanks to an AirTag.
That's funny. That's always the worst when you're seeing what the criminal is doing with your own stuff. It's like,
right.
Oh no, he's taking it to a gas station. Don't pay those exorbitant gas prices.
Right.
With my suitcase in your car.
But the stalking issue, of course, is a serious one. And so what are the issues that are being brought up here?
So stalking is a very serious issue. You have a situation where if somebody wanted to follow somebody, you just have to get, one of these AirTags on something that belongs to them. So a car, a device, anything. And then at least for a short period of time, the person will not know that they're being followed or surveilled. They're not going to know that they're being stalked. Apple, largely in response to these concerns, and because they're an enterprising company that cares about privacy, has set up this system where you get an alert on your phone. You've been near an AirTag for a long period of time. Right. The problem with that is most people who would get that alert don't have an AirTag and have no idea what that is or what it means. I can just imagine somebody getting an alert like that. It just, it's completely contextless. Yeah. So Apple is saying that they're taking that concern very seriously. They set up that feature that informs users. They also encourage people to call local law enforcement. That's not really a very foolproof solution. In a couple of the anecdotes here, people did call law enforcement, and law enforcement was basically like, yeah, we don't really know what to do with that information. File a police report, and we'll see what happens. And that goes, into the vast universe of police reports somewhere up in the sky where nothing happens.
Right. Yeah. I remember when I was a kid and I got a bicycle stolen, and it was a little bit of cynicism added to my life when I realized that my local police department was not going to aim all of their resources at getting back my stolen bicycle.
I know everybody discovers that for the first time. It's right. You file a police report, and if you actually ask an honest cop, like, what's going to happen with this? 9 times out of 10, they'll be like, oh no, this is for insurance purposes.
Right, exactly.
I should say more like 99 times out of 100.
Yeah. So, a couple things I find curious about this story. First of all, Apple is not the first company to come out with this sort of tracking technology. The company Tile has had little tracking tags for years. And it's always interesting to me that it seems as though, nothing gets attention, nothing generates clicks like a negative story about Apple.
Right.
So,
and I get it. I mean, they hold themselves up as this, the standard for privacy and security.
Right.
So I don't want to say they're asking for it, but they do invite this increased scrutiny. But I agree with you. It's not always fair.
Mm-hmm. So where do we come down in the middle, though? I mean, obviously, this technology has legitimate uses. I think having this on your luggage, for example, a great idea. You could put one in your own car. So if your car got stolen, you could try to, I can think of all kinds of great uses for this. But on the other hand, I do see the problem with it. It seems to me like Apple is in good faith trying to put things in place to try to minimize the stalking potential here. But is the stalking potential so much that a product like this shouldn't exist?
I wouldn't go that far. I think if you're going to have a product like this, it's best to put it in the relatively responsible hands of a company like Apple. They're not perfect. They make a ton of mistakes. We cover all of their mistakes, but they do respond to this feedback. The story also mentions there was a security feature where if the device has been disconnected from its home smartphone, so to speak, the smartphone that controls it, for more than 72 hours, then the AirTag will start beeping. And they shortened that to 24 hours to try and prevent, this type of stalking from occurring. So if you put it on somebody else's device, after 24 hours, it'll start beeping. 24 hours is still a long time. And you might be able to fulfill your stalking goals, whatever they are, within those 24 hours.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I don't think, in my opinion, is not that they should take this device off the market. I think it's a useful device, especially as somebody who loses things all the time. I think in the long run, it's just incumbent upon Apple to continue to make these adjustments. We are going to see viral stories on TikTok about, people discovering AirTags on the back of their license plate. That's going to be bad publicity for them. It's going to make people question whether these devices should exist. I wouldn't go that far. I'm generally more amenable when the device itself has some actual practical use and the benefits, at least conceivably, might outweigh the costs.
Yeah. I saw another interesting story not long after these came out where there was a gentleman who he'd bought himself a little electric scooter. He worked in a city, and so he would use his electric scooter to get around town. And he was afraid that it would get stolen, so he put AirTags on the scooter, but he actually put 2 AirTags on the scooter. He put a decoy AirTag that was very easy.
Very
easy
smart.
to
You never
find.
know which one is
So he hid one very carefully so that it wasn't easy to find, but he put a decoy one that was easy to find. So if the thieves stole his scooter, they would quickly find the decoy one, remove it, and think they were good to go. And sure enough, that's what happened.
This person, the criminals have not watched enough heist movies because I've seen that, you always have to put a decoy out there.
Yeah, so this guy was able to track the scooter down to a local, pawn shop, that sort of thing. And sure enough, he was able to get the police to come, and he did get his scooter back. But
very smart. I mean, maybe for every AirTag we produce, we just have to produce, one decoy so that you can.
Maybe there's a market
out.
there. Yeah, Apple can sell AirTag blanks that don't have the electronics inside. They just look
the
like
fake
an AirTag.
AirTags.
Yeah, There you go. It's a $1 million idea.
Yeah, but somehow we never get $1 million for these ideas.
We do not. No, ideas are a dime a dozen. It's execution, Ben. Execution.
I know. That's what we have to keep telling ourselves.
Right. All right, well, we will have a link to that story from the New York Times in the show notes. My story this week comes from the Wall Street Journal, written by James Rundle. And really, it's just sort of an overview of some of the things that might be coming this year in 2022 when it comes to regulation in the cybersecurity realm. The thing I wanted to focus on with you today, Ben, was reporting requirements. There are lots of other industries. When a bad thing happens, they are required to report it. First thing that comes to mind to me are airlines.
Yep.
If an accident happens.
Yep. All transportation covered by NTSB.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But even my understanding is even in general aviation, if you have an issue with your plane, that there are very specific rules about tracking the repairs and so on and so forth.
Right.
We don't have that in cybersecurity yet, and there is bipartisan support for a move to make that happen. They tried to put it in the Defense Authorization Act, but it got pulled out as part of the negotiations to get that passed. Where do you think we're going to see this go in the coming year?
Yeah, I was not surprised to see that removed from the Defense Authorization Bill. The Defense Authorization Bill is always this behemoth where it becomes kind of a Christmas tree. Anything that's vaguely related to security, you try and get it in the bill. And then negotiations whittle things down. Even though there is bipartisan support for these breach notification requirements, I think it's a complicated enough issue that I understand why they weren't able to sneak it in a larger bill. I think this is going to have to be kind of an all-hands-on-deck approach with a bunch of different stakeholders. One of the things this article talks about is the precarious state of cybersecurity generally in 2022. Obviously the pandemic continues and we're going to be dealing with staffing shortages. That is certainly going to apply to our industry. And then you combine that with the rapid increase in threats that we're seeing, the increased frequency of ransomware. When you start to institute mandatory reporting requirements, these are going to start to be very onerous on companies, particularly smaller companies that might not have the resources, might not have the compliance officers to know exactly what they have to report. So I think it might take a little while, but we need to develop like a comprehensive framework where we have very specific, actionable rules as to what a company has to do or any organization when they've been the victim of a breach. And I just don't, I understand why that didn't happen as part of the Defense Authorization Bill, but I do think it is going to happen going forward. I think we are going to be able to develop those standards. We now have a National Cyber Director in Chris Inglis and the head of CISA, Jen Easterly, who are very committed to reform in this area. And I think with their leadership and interest on both sides of the aisle in Congress, I think this is something that will probably get done sooner rather than later.
I was reading through an interesting thread on Reddit yesterday for a bunch of chief security officers, and they were talking about incident response and specifically responding to ransomware threats. And someone brought up the point that they've seen cases where when an outside company has been brought in to help clean up the mess after a ransomware attack, that sometimes they have been specifically requested not to submit a final report because of discoverability.
Right.
So let's talk about that, with the liability part of this.
Yeah, I mean, that's what makes this so difficult and so complicated is if you think you're going to be held liable for a breach, it behooves you to bury all the bodies. And so that's not exactly a, favorable incentive structure. I don't know how you work around that because certainly I think people who are legitimately or companies that are legitimately negligent, particularly when it comes to like PII, personally identifiable information, we want to hold them accountable. We want to have some sort of legal mechanism where they can be held liable. They're the people who caused the loss of that information. But I also think, maybe we have to be more careful and have some safe harbor provisions where certain things, internal reports might not be the subject to discovery in federal litigation. I don't know exactly how that would work in practice, but it certainly is a problem. I think there's going to be less incentive to fully document exactly what happened, do a type of after action report if that's going to be held against you once you get into discovery. It's not a problem that's unique to this field. It's true when we talk about all different types of accidents. We see it in the transportation sector all the time. I do think the difference in this field is it's still relatively new, so there isn't sort of a uniformly agreed upon best practice as to how to respond to these incidents, which means, it's much harder to determine whether a company has actually been negligent because you're compared to your peers. You're compared to what a reasonable organization would have done. So in that sense, I mean, maybe, and just thinking out loud here, you can have a shorter safe harbor provision where information might not be discoverable, at least for the next 10 years or 5 years or whatever, until we, can figure out some justiciable standards.
Is this a chicken and the egg kind of thing where, we have to, we want to establish whatever the standards are, but we're still kind of reaching around in the dark to figure out what's reasonable?
I think that's exactly what the problem is, because the threats themselves are getting more sophisticated. So, and it takes a while once an attack happens, a ransomware attack or any breach of information to figure out exactly what happened. The best example recently that affected our state personally here in Maryland is the Maryland Department of Health was the victim of some sort of cyber incident. Still hasn't been divulged whether it was a ransomware attack, although certainly that's been the speculation. But, the COVID dashboard, for example, in the state of Maryland was down for a month while our cases were accelerating. So we were kind of in the dark, so it had those kinetic effects. We were suffering the consequences. And we still basically have no idea what happened. Lots of people within the state suffered consequences. People couldn't apply for Medicaid funds. But, it's still so soon after the incident. The incident itself is so novel that, it would be impossible to develop a set of standards based on this incident, to prevent it from happening again. So it is a chicken and the egg problem. The threat landscape keeps expanding, and our universe of potential best practices will constantly be expanding as well.
Right. I suppose part of this too is establishing, what's the equivalent of a cyber fender bender, and what's the equivalent of a plane crash?
A full-on, full-on collision.
Or
exactly.
An actual train wreck, right?
Right. And that's very hard to define in the cyber realm. You could say the monetary value of the information that's been breached, but that doesn't always capture the full extent of the consequences. I don't think there was a lot of money to be earned from a lot of the breaches we've seen, but they were still very disruptive and still had, pretty negative consequences on people's everyday lives. So I don't know. I don't know exactly how you would measure that. It's not as easy. With a fender bender, you go and get an estimate. It's just not the same in this cyber realm, where it's not always as simple as, here's the monetary value of the information that's been breached. That's, because it happens in the public sector, where you're talking about, stealing people's personally identifiable information from government databases. The consequences can go beyond simple, monetary value. So,
right.
Yeah, it's really hard to determine.
Yeah. All right. Well, for sure, we've got an interesting year ahead of us on many realms, and so we'll see how this plays out. As you said, I think it's good to see that we've got some good folks in place at the federal level who both know what they're doing and seem to be in good faith, really set on doing the right thing here. So I think that's good to see. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, we will have a link to that story in the show notes. We would love to hear from you. If you have a story or a topic you'd like for us to discuss on our show, you can email us. It's caveat@thecyberwire.com.
Now, a word from our sponsor, the Johns Hopkins University Information Security Institute, currently seeking qualified applicants for its innovative Master of Science in Security Informatics degree program. Study alongside world-class interdisciplinary experts and gain unparalleled educational, research, and professional experience in information security and assurance. Interested U.S. citizens should consider the National Science Foundation's CyberCore Scholarship for Service program, which covers tuition and a $6,000 annual professional development allowance, as well as providing a $37,000 additional annual stipend. Apply for the scholarship and the fall semester by March 1st. Learn more at cs.jhu.edu/MSSI.
Ben, I recently had the pleasure of speaking with Richard Carriere. He is from a company called CyberLink, and our conversation centers on artificial intelligence and the ways that is transforming surveillance. Here's my conversation with Richard Carriere.
No, at the moment, we're at a very interesting point in time. The technology, if we go back even 2 years, it was the beginning of the emergence, if you want, of edge-based facial recognition. So edge-based computing, finally, lots of offerings came up that were powerful enough to do this kind of processing without needing cloud processing, which causes all sorts of issues that we could talk about. So that's like where we were, but the market demand was not there yet. Facial recognition had been used for a long time, whether it's kiosks like Global Entry or some, people, anyone who uses one brand of phones, mobile phones, we probably give our access to everything in our life using our face without thinking twice.
Right.
But other than that, a lot of press, a lot of opinions, what I call the doomsday sayers that exist since the discovery of fire were there. And there were some good value points 2-3 years ago. Now the technology has caught up. So things such as the ability to easily spoof or some bias that were there for different skin complexions or ethnicities, just the ability to measure vectors on the face or to create that unique key was a bit more challenging. By and large, these things have been resolved today as AI has continued to improve the models. So now we're getting the point of adoption. And if you read the press, you say it's terrible, like this thing will never take off. But then just look everywhere around you. It's popping off left and right. Consumers are adopting. They're not afraid as long as they view the convenience of a use case that requires the facial recognition and that they feel that it's provided by a trusted vendor. We already give a lot of our personal information to every hotel chain, bank, and whatnot. So I don't think it's a problem. So we have that. Enterprises see the need back after COVID. A lot of offices have started opening. Big companies, a lot of them will start opening, will reopen their office January 1st. All sorts of models that are hybrid, potentially they'll have a lot of people who show up some days of the week, don't show up, creating access control needs. There's cost, obviously pressure. So finding solutions to reduce the cost of security, surveillance, controlling access flow. So there's lots of things where there's demand just in the business. I just come back from a executive summit from the retail industry, retail and hospitality, where you had C-level people of about 20 companies that could develop and provide technology for retail and hospitality. And of all the things, and we were mapping, talking about what's coming, not the next 5 to 10 years, but the next 2-3 years. And every single use case, the person brought up what they were doing, plus facial recognition. And it's because their distributors, their end customers, whether it's hotels, restaurants, retail chains, demand that. Was very happy to be there because I was the facial recognition guy. So there's a lot of opportunities. But this is where we are right now in the market. So technology is there. Customers are there. Business are there. So we just need to go get running. Make sure that what is done following all the rules of ethics, and I can talk a bit like that on that after. But I think we're in a very good place for facial recognition at the moment.
What do you and folks in the business see as some of the opportunities that are going to open up in the next couple of years when it comes to facial recognition technology making life better for consumers?
Number one, I would say giving access and protecting access to everything around you, whether it's your car, whether it's your home, whether it's your work, online, and we're talking here physical access, then you have online access, your bank account remotely, your computer. This is where this thing is moving very fast, where people are comfortable and they will see these things pop up left and right. The other one is around, I would say, identity verification, like these things that today require an in-person meeting. So think of banking, think of buying a bottle of wine. You need to show an ID and you need to prove that you are there. So ordering online these things or opening a bank account online is not feasible today. Even checking in a hotel, if you go like the big chains, they say, oh, you can check in online, but make sure when you show up the hotel, you go to the desk to still show your ID and show that it's you. So we have technologies there where we can authentify the license plate on one side and not the license plate, sorry, the ID card, whether it's a driver's license, identity card, passport, and then make sure at the other end that it's a real person, it's not a photo or a video that's spoofed. So this kind of thing, as people with COVID, those who are not already doing everything from home, now want to for the convenience, we'll see that. And I would say the third one is about just pure customer experience, whether it's retail. Talk to anyone in retail, in hospitality. They lost the airline industry. They lost a lot of money not having customers. Now they're all very aggressive to gain market share as things go back or stay in business. So things like contactless everything. So like I think there's a pilot program right now at the Atlanta airport with Delta that international flights, you can literally go from the curbside all the way to your seat on the plane without touching anything, talking to anyone. You just go through, and it's all facial recognition based. So these things, imagine this versus the long queues that you have sometimes at airports. Talk about an improvement of customer experience, of streamlining things. Anywhere that you have bottlenecks, like sports stadiums, companies like Clears that start having their technology not just at security in airports, but to go to sports stadiums. So people just walk in, put it to in fact, they just go to the kiosk, bring it to the next level, which is a technology like ours. You can have a couple of cameras in front of each entrance and people just walk in the stadium like they own the place. We've deployed that, not in sports stadium yet, but we've deployed that in factories. There's a factory, I think, of 20,000 employees somewhere in Asia that implemented that. And there was a bottleneck of half an hour for employees to walk in the place and do all the checks for security, COVID, their security gear, and then another half hour to leave the workplace after the day. They replaced it with cameras and face me technology. And employees don't even slow down. It's like going to the fast track on the freeway. So they get in, they come out. We resolved the worst issue that company had with 1080p cameras or software that runs in workstations that are in the four figure, not the six figures, and everybody's happy.
How is the industry responding to all of the concerns about privacy?
Well, it's not a new concern. And this is where I said at the beginning, the technology is ready and is mature enough to be deployed in almost every use case you can think of. The application, privacy protection, is not facial recognition itself. It's the database, the data that you have. And there's a few things that some facial recognition solutions like ours can help a lot, is that you don't need to have the actual picture of somebody's face in a database. What we do, we create what we call a template, which is a small encrypted file with a bunch of zeros and ones that maps vectors on someone's face. And every single one of them, there's a chance in a million to more or less to have two that would be mixed up together. So they're all very unique. Think of a thumbprint, the size of a thumbprint versus the size of your face in terms of precision, and it gives you an idea. So it's a chance in a million that is there. So it's a tiny file, highly encrypted. It's very hard to reproduce, very easily identifiable with the right technology. So there's no mix-up of people. It's very rare when it happens. And so these are things, and the fact that technologies now don't have to send everything to the cloud and back. Like the early days, you would take a picture, send the picture to the cloud, their cloud processing, they would extract a template. A few seconds later, it would come back and forth. And the next thing you knew, it took a minute to recognize someone. Now we talk about very reasonable hardware, nothing space age. Half a second, you identify people in front of the camera, and that could be up to 70 people, I think, in a 1080p camera, without getting too much into details. I identify there's somebody, this person, we read the template on their face, we match with the database another template, we say, oh, this person is John, and that this happens. And we can also tell you in that half second that John is a man, he's between the age of 45 and 50, and he seems happy. To answer the question, I took a big detour. So there's nothing in the facial recognition here that invades privacy. If anything, it protects privacy because there's no better means to control access, better than a password, better than PIN, the eyes, whatever. But then if the database that has the information about customers and let's say their social security number, bank accounts, name of their mom and passport information, if this is not properly protected, then this is where the weakness is. And this is a problem that has existed for a long time. Several of us, we know that, without naming anyone, that our private personal information is probably everywhere on the dark web by now. So this is a false concern. And the best proof, again, is consumers. The convenience is there. They know that nobody will do worse than that hotel loyalty program or credit agency or whatever. So people go with it again.
Yeah. We've seen a lot of news stories about a lack of accuracy with some of these systems, particularly, as you mentioned early on, having trouble with people of color or, types of people who aren't necessarily well represented in the training data. Where are we now? I mean, how do you as an industry put people at ease that we're beyond that?
Yeah, well, there's one source that is highly credible and used as the benchmark is NIST, the National Institute for Standards and Technology. They every month or every 3 months, they benchmark, like we can submit once every 3 months, each company, a vendor like us can submit an algorithm or a number of algorithms, and they do tests and benchmark of all of them, and they benchmark the accuracy. Is it working? Like you take your iPhone and 1 times out of 20, it doesn't work. It's because they have 95% accuracy. So they map the top players. We're at the top of the list together mainly with companies in Russia and China that don't commercialize in the US for all sorts of reasons. But we're talking about 99.8%, in fact, 99.73% accuracy, which means that it's very rare that they won't recognize your face right away. And that is measured independently by NIST. And they do test all sorts of tests. They do what they call Visa picture, so face not moving. They have a wild picture on the side. They have all the different models. Then they have tests for different ethnic groups. Is the accuracy different? The models, as AI keeps improving, we keep making our models better. It integrates people like with different smaller or less visible aspects related to whether it's the ethnic background, the skin complexion, even in some cases, it could be a handicap. It could be like the type of hair style in front of the face or not. In our case, even masks. If somebody wears a mask, that was a big problem 2 years ago. You cannot recognize them. The level of accuracy goes down very, very low. Now we're at a point where if you show up in front of a camera, face me is on the other side, you're wearing a mask properly over your nose and mouth. Just the data points between the eyes and the nose bridge are sufficient to give a accuracy level of up to 98.9%, which is literally like as good as without wearing a mask. And on top of that, we can identify, let's say in a hall or somewhere, if people are supposed to wear masks and they don't, then we can pinpoint the people for that. So all these things are not only improved by companies, but NIST measures them, ranks them, and gives a pretty good idea who's good and who's not so good. And we're pretty happy that we're good there.
Is there collaboration among the companies who provide these sorts of things in terms of having some sort of code of ethics, something along those lines?
I have not seen anything. What I can tell you, and some of our competitors are doing things that we would not do. We try to be very respectful in every possible way. If you go to cyberlink.com on our homepage, one of the few items that show up at the bottom when company information is our statement of human rights. I don't know many companies that have that on their website, but it came at the beginning of our facial recognition work where we say, hold on, if we're going to do it, we're going to do it with the highest level of ethics without sharing with you the ingredients to our secret sauce. When we build our models, we do nothing that is remotely questionable in terms of are they using pictures of people who did not agree and are they doing things that are twisted? So we start there. It's totally clean. And the applications of the technology, we provide first a tool, a solution that addresses these problems of bias, of even spoofing. There was IEEE ran a contest at a conference on computer vision a few months ago. There was 265 companies that submitted their tool to try to detect spoofing attempts. We ended up number 3, again, at the very top, just behind a Chinese and a Russian company that were a fraction of a percentage better, but basically identifying people, whether you try to steal identity, so you use a picture of somebody or a video on a phone, or even if you want to be more like thriller movies, like that movie of 20 plus years ago, Face Off, where you can have a mask that look like somebody else. And like we're very good at that. So that's what you have to look at. And then whether it's us or other vendors, if you're a IoT or a manufacturer, before signing with some technology, you better look at that very carefully. And as far as we know, they all do. I would say the ethics come from individual companies. It comes from the partners we have. We are strategically partnering with the chipset makers, the hardware makers, which are all companies many, many times, a few orders of magnitude larger than we are. And they all have a very strict code of ethics. So whenever we partner with them around facial recognition, we have their legal office involved with us to make sure that we don't promote or do things that are questionable. And so far, we're passing this test with flying colors. So we feel good about that. I mean, could something happen that one of our customers uses the technology to sell to a company that does something to do profile people in their back without letting them know? At that point, it gets very far. We try to avoid all of these things, but anything that is on our control or within our reach, working with our partners, we're very careful about that.
All right, Ben, what do you think? I mean, this is an interesting area, yes?
Yeah, it's kind of a theme of this show that you can introduce something with such promise, but it always has, significant pitfalls. I think we see that here. He talks about some of the advantages of this type of technology, especially for individual businesses. Yeah. So, keeping patrons in stores longer using artificial intelligence, identifying your most important customers, etc. But if it's going to be used for, to further enhance our surveillance state, then we really have to balance those two interests. So, yeah, the technology itself is extremely promising. It's cool. It's exciting. But we just, always have to be on guard that it's not going to be abused by bad actors.
Yeah, absolutely. I think about, back when I was in my teen years and I worked at retail and I worked in a local mall, and sometimes, mall security would come around with a printed out sheet of paper that said, here's some pictures of folks who've been trouble in the mall lately, been shoplifting and things like that. And this is kind of taking that to the next automated level. And so I can see good and bad. I can see it being a necessary thing. If I'm a shop owner, I want to keep an eye out for.
Right. Oh, that face is bad news. Yeah.
Known troublemakers. But on the other hand, if it is in the realm of artificial intelligence, we've certainly discussed over and over again how there's all sorts of potential for false positives, and that's no good either.
Let's just say it's not always a foolproof system, to say the least.
Right, absolutely. All right, well, our thanks to Richard Carriere from CyberLink for joining us. We do appreciate him taking the time. That is our show. We want to thank all of you for listening. The Caveat podcast is proudly produced in Maryland at the startup studios of Data Tribe, where they're co-building the next generation of cybersecurity teams and technologies. Our senior producer is Jennifer Iben. Our executive editor is Peter Kilpie. I'm Dave Bittner.
And I'm Ben Yellen.
Thanks for listening.